In the heart of a dusty, forgotten town, where the sun scorched the earth and desperation clung to the air like a heavy fog, a piercing cry shattered the stillness of the marketplace. Elias, a weary traveler with a heart hardened by years of wandering, froze mid-step, his boots grinding against the cracked dirt. Before him, a crude wooden platform stood, and atop it, 3 women dressed in tattered wedding gowns, their faces streaked with tears, were being auctioned off by the very men who had once vowed to love them. The crowd jeered, coins clinked, and the husbands, faces cold and unyielding, barked prices like merchants selling livestock. Elias's chest tightened, a storm of rage and sorrow swirling within him. He couldn't walk away, not this time. Elias was no stranger to hardship. A carpenter by trade, he'd spent his life drifting from town to town, building homes for others while never finding one for himself. At 42, with calloused hands and a quiet demeanor, he carried the weight of a past he rarely spoke of, a wife lost to illness, a child who never drew breath. But as he stared at the 3 brides, Marigold, Clara, and Lila, their eyes pleading for salvation, something long dormant in him stirred. He stepped forward, his voice steady but loud enough to silence the crowd. "I'll take them," he declared, tossing his last coins onto the platform. The husband sneered, but the deal was done. Elias led the women away, their trembling hands clinging to his worn jacket, and brought them to the modest cabin he'd rented on the edge of town. Marigold, the eldest at 35, had a fierce spirit beneath her bruised exterior. Her husband, a gambler, had auctioned her to settle debts, stripping her of the dignity she'd fought to maintain through years of abuse. Clara, barely 20, was shy and fragile, her wide eyes haunted by the betrayal of a man who'd promised her a future only to sell her when his business failed. Lila, 28, was defiant, her sharp tongue masking the pain of a marriage that had turned cold and cruel after her husband's infidelity. Each woman carried scars, some visible, some buried deep, and Elias, though a stranger, felt an unshakable resolve to help them heal. The first challenge came swiftly: trust. The women, shaken and suspicious, questioned Elias's intentions. "Why would you save us? What do you want?" Lila demanded, her arms crossed, eyes blazing. Elias, sitting at his rickety table, met her gaze. "I want nothing but to see you free," he said simply. "I've lost too much to let others suffer." His honesty softened their defenses, but trust was a slow bloom. Marigold, practical and guarded, took to cleaning the cabin, her hands moving with purpose as if to reclaim control. Clara, too timid to speak much, hovered near Elias, watching his every move. Lila, however, tested him, challenging his patience with sharp words and late-night pacing, as if daring him to cast her out. Days turned to weeks, and the cabin became a fragile sanctuary. Elias worked long hours at a nearby mill, returning to share meals of bread and stew, listening as the women began to open up. Marigold spoke of dreams she'd buried running a bakery, her hands kneading dough instead of scrubbing floors. Clara whispered of a love for painting, her fingers tracing invisible patterns in the air. Lila, though slower to confide, admitted a passion for teaching, her voice softening as she recalled reading to children in her village. But the past wasn't easily shed. One night, Marigold's husband appeared, drunk and bellowing, demanding her back. Elias stood firm, his broad shoulders blocking the doorway, and sent the man away with a quiet, unyielding threat. The incident rattled them all, and Clara wept, fearing they'd never escape their shadows. Money was another hurdle. Elias's earnings barely covered food and rent, and the women, stripped of resources by their husbands, had nothing. Determined to help, Elias taught Marigold to bake bread in the cabin's old oven, selling loaves to neighbors. Her first sale, 3 loaves for a handful of coins, brought tears to her eyes, a flicker of pride reigniting. Clara, with Elias's encouragement, began sketching on scraps of wood, her delicate landscapes catching the eye of a local merchant. Lila, resourceful and bold, bartered with townsfolk, trading chores for books to rebuild her confidence. But whispers spread, cruel gossip about the auctioned brides and the strange man who'd taken them in. The town's judgment stung, and Clara, fragile as ever, withdrew, fearing they'd never be seen as more than their past. Elias faced his own struggles. Exhaustion gnawed at him, and doubts crept in. Could he truly help them? His nights were sleepless, haunted by memories of his lost family, yet the women's resilience fueled him. He began asking around town, seeking good men, honest, kind ones who might offer the women a fresh start. It wasn't easy. Many scoffed, others leered, but Elias persisted, his quiet determination unwavering. One evening, a blacksmith named Thomas, a widower with a gentle laugh, lingered after buying Marigold's bread. They talked for hours, and over weeks, a bond grew cautious, then warm. A painter, Daniel, saw Clara's sketches and, struck by her talent, offered to teach her, his patience coaxing her from her shell. For Lila, a schoolteacher named Henry, bookish and earnest, arrived, drawn by her fire and intellect. The road wasn't smooth. Marigold hesitated, fearing another betrayal, but Thomas's steady kindness won her heart. Clara, terrified of trust, nearly fled when Daniel grew close, but Elias sat with her, sharing his own grief, and she found courage to try again. Lila resisted Henry, her sharp edges clashing with his calm, until a quiet night of reading together softened her guard. The final challenge came when the husbands returned, a trio of anger and entitlement, demanding their property. The town, once skeptical, rallied to Thomas, Daniel, Henry, and neighbors stood with Elias, driving the men away for good. The women, no longer victims, faced their past with heads high, backed by a community they'd won over. Months later, the cabin buzzed with life. Marigold, now engaged to Thomas, opened a small bakery, her laughter filling the air. Clara, painting beside Daniel, glowed with newfound confidence, their love blossoming. Lila, teaching with Henry, found purpose, her sharp wit now a gift to her students. Elias, watching from the porch, felt a weight lift. He'd given them a chance, but they'd rebuilt themselves, stronger than before. As the sun set, casting gold over the town, Elias smiled, knowing freedom wasn't just escape, it was the courage to begin again. And in that dusty cabin, 3 brides, once auctioned, had found not just husbands, but hope, dignity, and a future worth fighting for.